Martin, my friend. Welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Let's do the quick podcast thing where people who aren't familiar with who you are get familiar with who you are quickly before we dive into some topics. So who is Martin McDonald?
Wow, what a question. I did a podcast. Podcast recently on on a more sort of personal type podcast, and I was introduced as a philosopher, and I was like, wow, I that's the first time, and I was like beaming with smiling, and I said, thanks so much. It's the first time she said, and she was interviewing me with her husband, and he was like, I want to be called a philosopher. He was like, he's like,
Fondly.
that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so and that's partly because of my own podcast, not another nutrition podcast that you're aware of, because I do some uh I call them wisdom episodes, because yeah, I do like philosophy. I do think it holds a lot of value in the world. And some of my deeper critical thinking, I guess, through nutrition, my background has led me there. But yeah, my background, for anyone who doesn't know me, I was a lowly performance nutritionist. I love social media. I love education. I was a university lecturer for many years, and and just kind of started working more and more with individual clients. Then had my own consultancy, which, because of my love for teaching, I guess I was more interested in educating clients as opposed to coaching them, maybe. And but then I wanted to educate other coaches and nutritionists, and I guess some of the success I had, I love business as well. So some of the success I had around that, I wanted to just teach. And so in 2016, as you know, Mac Nutrition Uni was came about. And I said this recently at one of my seminars, my aggressive dieting seminar, which I know we're going to discuss. I do an intro slide because I said, just in case you don't know who I am, because I was introduced, I spoke at the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine conference, and it's a room full of doctors and academics and whoever. And someone said, oh yeah, this is Martin McDonald, he's really funny on Instagram. And I was like, that was my intro. And I was like,
It's a
oh my
philosopher and
goodness.
hysterical on social media. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to get any buy or respect. The person before me was Professor Tony Goldson, and his introduction was obviously fantastic. But people, I want people to, and then some people simply know me as the creator or founder of Mac Nutrition Uni, this the world's best nutrition qualification. And but I do have this background as a practitioner, and lots of what Mac Nutrition Uni has become is off the back of our very successful consultancy working with, and it's quite a nice qualification in that we do go into lots of areas of working with people. We cut out all the bump that you maybe get at university, which people don't really care about, the sociology of food, the food policy, the how to create sausages, all that kind of stuff. And just how to work with people, but whether that's people in the corporate setting, sports nutrition setting, body composition, health. So yeah, that's kind of me to today. And then I guess, yeah, as a public speaker, I just love talking to audiences publicly. And that's why I'm doing my kind of tour of seminars at the minute as well.
Let's talk about that because I want to hear a little bit about give me like the when, the where, the what about the aggressive dieting seminar, and then
Mm.
I'm a bit selfishly more interested about how that became a topic that you're so passionate about, and then I'll dive into some questions about kind of just nuts and bolts on your philosophy on rapid fat loss. But when, where is the seminar, and how did this become a topic that you're so passionate about that you're going to talk about it quite a bit?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question how it came about. My next seminar is in Las Vegas, so coming over to the US on the 10th of August. And that's a full day seminar. Well, 10 till 4. I stupidly thought I did the first few. I did one in Sydney and Perth and Singapore, London. And I stupidly thought I'd be able to deliver it in 3 hours. And we were, it just, yeah, it was ridiculous. I started at 6 p.m. because I was doing another talk on the Saturday, and we were talking like into the night. It was ridiculous. So it's now a full 10 till 4 seminar with after party or drinks and whatever, where we all carry on talking about everything. But yeah, so Las Vegas on the 10th of August. And the seminar, the reason I came to talk about this subject, actually back in 2015, I did a talk where I'm talking to a very, what I deemed knowledgeable group. And back then, you could wow people by saying, you know what, breakfast potentially isn't the most important meal of the day. Fat doesn't make you fat. Carbohydrates aren't the devil. People are like, no way. And so it was the first time I wasn't going to wow anyone with such simple stuff. But something that I had seen time and time again was that individuals struggling to get results with their clients. And what I saw is that they were scared to drop their calories down because, for instance, maybe they didn't understand underreporting in the way that they should have. They believed that people were eating 1,000 calories a day and couldn't lose weight. They believed maybe in the boogeyman of metabolic damage. All of these different things. So I essentially went in and spoke to them about the evidence behind lower calorie intakes. And that sounds very simplistic, but essentially the huge amount of evidence we have around protein sparing modified fast, very low energy diets, total meal replacement type protocols. And I think then as I spoke about it more, talked to more people about it, and people started using it and they had all these epiphanies, I then thought, do you know what? People need to be taught about the evidence. I've read all of the research. They need to find out about the fact that, oh, hold on, my client's losing more weight than ever, eating less than ever, and has no hunger. I mean, that's the thing that people, whenever I posted about on my social media a couple of times this month about people who've been to the seminars, and someone said, Martin, I didn't want to question you, and I did believe you, but when my client came back to me and said his hunger had completely gone, and I've been talking about this, I call it this 3 to 5 day utopia. And it is where you start to get all of the real benefits and just effortless, weight loss. And it sounds so quacky. You hear all these gurus and people selling you rubbish on the internet, the HCG diet, all this rubbish, saying effortless weight loss. And we know that's rubbish. But it's completely evidence-based, and it's what all the research shows us. And he said, I cannot believe it. I'm taken aback that his food noise has gone. He's comfortably sticking to the calories that I've given him. And, it's a bit like, I've added in slides around GLP-1 agonists and how sometimes people, these maybe we'll call them weight loss resistant individuals, they're not actually metabolically deranged. They are people who struggle with weight loss, and it's highly, highly likely to do with the energy balance equation. And they say, I'm eating 1,200 calories a day or however many calories a day, and I can't lose weight. There's something wrong with me. My metabolism's broken. And then they're prescribed this drug, which we know first and foremost reduces hunger and reduces essentially subconscious calorie intake. And so they then they start effortlessly losing weight, and they say, oh my goodness, my metabolism's fixed, because they don't understand how the drug works. They think it's like some kind of fat burner. They think it's a metabolic booster. But all it is they're able to stick to the same food diary that they were submitting to you, but they're actually eating that many calories, and their weight just falls off. So this is essentially what you're getting from the aggressive dieting protocol that I'm talking about, and I've created this calculator for. And so this is what's really wowing people, is the hunger side of things. You say, what do people think happens when you aggressive diet? And they say, well, slows your metabolism. And I show them all the evidence about that versus moderate protocols. Well, they'll regain the weight quicker. Show them all the evidence around that. Again, I do think there's some massive limitations within the research, which is why you get some of the negative effects in the research, which you don't get if you apply a much more performance nutrition based model. In the research, you have to control for confounded variables. You can't just throw the kitchen sink at someone. I mean, you can if you are a bad researcher trying to sell a personalized nutrition product, which I'd be happy to talk about, the new Zoe study, where they essentially did that. They used their biotechnology, but they also helped them in 10 other ways to help them lose weight. And they said, oh, look, our product works. But then they did all these other things, nutritional counseling, etc. But so in the research, you have to just go, we're going to do this. We're not going to change their exercise. We're not going to give them any other supplements. We're not going to do X, Y, Z. We just want to understand the effects of, for instance, this calorie intake. And so, yeah, you can improve a lot on the research, which I believe is what I've done with the calculator and the information I deliver in the seminar, and particularly how to coach it or how to coach yourself. There's a lot of stuff that's people just say to me, well, can I just eat nothing? And will it do the same thing? And I'm like, try it. It definitely won't, because everyone's done that on every other diet that's ever existed. Your Herbalife, your Cambridge diet, your what was it? Beyonce's maple syrup diet or something back in the early 2000s. But anyway, yeah. So to answer your question, that's kind of where it began, and that's where it's sort of continuing on from. And yeah, people are sort of very interested, obviously.
I want to talk about how aggressive we're talking here, just for the listener to put some context to this, and
yeah,
maybe let's start with that, and then I'd like to throw a couple of, like you said, what you might hear in response to somebody recommending a more aggressive approach. I believe there to be at least like two buckets of physiological considerations that people might have an issue with, and then maybe more on the psychological adherence, practical side of things. But how, when we're talking about aggressive dieting, how aggressive are we talking in relation to what might be some of the more standard recommendations in terms of size of calorie deficit? So when somebody goes to your aggressive dieting calculator and they put in numbers, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because we don't have good definitions in the research or anywhere, a textbook to really talk about this. And I will say that my version of aggressive dieting, as I've kind of alluded to, the research, you might see studies of many weeks and months on 390 calories, 400 calories, whatever, 500 calories. And I believe that's where you get some of the major issues that we see with regards to for the obvious one, my calculator. The whole point of it is, and the updated version, the most recent one, has lots of like abilities to change things based on your preferences. So I could not believe the number of vegans who have come to my seminars, considering I've, made jokes about vegans, but they're all just the vegans who are cool and they can take a joke. But I even have a setting where it's like, look, I'm a vegan, and aggressive dieting, being able to hit what we might deem as even a moderate protein intake, is quite hard when you're limited on calories. I'm not saying it's hard for a vegan to hit protein, but when you're saying sub 1,000 calories, it does become hard. So my calculator stops you going to those levels, and it has essentially some stops on it. So it will tell you, the whole point of the calculator is, what is the fastest physiological rate that you as a human being, so you put in all of your anthropometrics and everything, and it tells you and your physiology, your body fat percentage, you would be able to eat 100 calories per day, and your deficit is maybe 2,100 calories per day. And based on your physiology, all of those calories should be able to come from adipose tissue. So the energy transfer rate from adipose, lipolysis into our blood, crossing over into the mitochondria to be burned, it will tell you what that rate is. But then the calculator will say, but don't be stupid. Don't eat that. We're going to show you the number, but the number you should eat at, and it might say 683, whatever. And I think the lowest, I've picked that number because I can remember seeing it. And really, no one's typically been able to put in a real life human and get it to give you a number lower than around that value. And there's lots of stops that it puts in. For instance, let's just take protein intake, because people typically understand it. If you're eating 390 calories per day, how do you think you're going to be able to consume fiber? How do you think you're going to be able to consume even an essential level of fatty acids? And consuming enough protein, because one of the key things as well, a huge number of questions I've had around perimenopausal women, postmenopausal women, and lots of the research I present is in that group. There's a great paper, a longitudinal, and showing lots of follow-up data, which is fantastic, in postmenopausal women. And it's a key group of individuals who seemingly will benefit from this, but there are maybe some contraindications with that group, which my calculator then stops them being issues. And in the research, we're seeing things like bone mineral density loss, obviously. So, stopping that happening as a standard, because there's no, in the research, you could tell before the study started it's what was going to happen. So regarding the definitions, I've given you sort of an idea of, okay, the calorie intake. No one should be surprised if they're getting something between 700, 800, 900 calories per day. Look, it tells me to eat about 1400, but I know that I don't get the benefits of aggressive dieting at 1400. So it then gives you abilities to say, actually, I'm going to eat 1100. And then it will say, okay, based on that, you will need to refeed at this level, at this frequency, to stop lean body mass loss. But I get the huge benefits in adherence and losing food noise and hunger, like cooking for children, which I think we're going to maybe touch a little bit on child nutrition. Cooking for children, I'm a picker. I will pick at their food. I call it daddy tax. There's sweets around. I'm not someone lives like a monk. Lots of people sort of maybe make judgments about the way people look. And because I look a certain way, mainly because of genetics, and a long history of training, they think, oh, he's one of these people who's just anal and thinks about everything he eats and goes to the gym all the time. Like, truth be told, I am bored of the gym. I would much rather spend time with my children and working. Way more than, but I just go in and do some bicep curls and tricep push downs. And food wise, I love food the same as a lot of people. So, it's another reason why I'm quite passionate about aggressive dieting, because it means I can spend the absolute minimum amount of time dieting, thinking about food, doing these things. But I find it fun as well. It's a nice endeavor. I kind of say this in general about aggressive or moderate approaches. If it's not do you swear on your podcast?
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. It's that sort of typical phrase. And that should be, it's like, oh, you run a marathon. It's like, God, I hate this. This is rubbish. It's like, no, people go, oh, I'm training for this marathon. It's really exciting. It's like, oh, it's hard work. That's how people should see a dieting process. It's not, oh, poor me. It should be, I am so privileged that I get to do this. I can pay for a coach, or I have the knowledge to do this. I can afford food. I can afford the type of food I need. And again, with this process, you're not going to hate yourself into change. You're not going to hate yourself into a maple syrup diet. You're going, oh my goodness, have you heard about this amazing new protocol, which is going to promote health, and promote losing weight in a healthy way, but is also going to be quite exciting because you get insane results that you can see really on a daily basis instead of a grind for 12 weeks.
When I think of I was trying to think of, just put myself in the shoes of a listener who hears, you talking about dieting with larger deficits, going faster, in a world where, I think we're all on the same page of sustainability. We're living under this, it should be sustainable it should be sustainable in air quotes, meaning like long term, what we're trying to do is get yourself to a healthy body weight and remain there. So what you're doing necessarily sustainable or not, but we are ultimately we're not just saying, hey, this is something that I'm recommending people do before a photo shoot. This is something you're recommending as part of a long-term approach to getting healthy for the long term. And I can think of at least 6 things that might come to somebody's mind as like, yeah, this is a bad idea because of this. So 6 kind of issues that somebody might take. And I will open the door for you to go as deep into any of them as you'd like. And I, again, broken them down to physiology and then maybe on the psychology side of things. And again, we can keep them short. We can go deep into it. But I think from a physiology side, and you can add or subtract to this list, but we have fears around metabolic adaptation, about ruining somebody's metabolism, metabolic damage, misconceptions about metabolic adaptation. And then we have muscle loss, lean body mass loss, and we have intense amounts of hunger. And so, and again, I'm not stating that those are a fact. I'm saying these are the things that somebody might hear or think of when they think of, oh, I'm going to go into a huge deficit. And so we start with like metabolic adaptation and damage. That's something from a metabolism perspective. This is a bad idea because of my metabolism. What do we say to that?
Yeah. It's such a cool question. It's actually the start of my seminar, the first third. I go through all of the research and we do a little sort of group task around some of these, exactly as you said. It's not necessarily that I say, not that you guys think this, but what do you think a client might say? Or what do you think a family member, because we understand about support networks and people undermining processes because they're just getting at us and saying, well, that's not healthy. And so all of these things you brought up do come up. And I go through in depth all of the research because as well, it's about 50% coaches, 50% Gen Pop who come to my seminar. And I want them to be able to protect themselves from these sort of attacks from wherever they may come from. So the metabolic adaptation one, or metabolic damage, or these sorts of things, it's quite a misunderstood area. And I have seen some supposedly sort of evidence-based, one of them being a sort of podcaster in the UK, and talking about as though if you diet someone on 1,000 calories, they will immediately adapt to that number of calories. So it was basically like, oh, you want to diet them on a high number. So when they adapt to that, you then lower it down and then they adapt to that. And I sort of say, if you adapt, if you can genuinely maintain your body weight on 1,000 calories a day, you don't need to go any further because you're already arrived. You've arrived at Shredsville. Like, you're shredded if you're genuinely maintaining on that. Rosenbaum is a key researcher in this area, and if anyone sort of geeky wants to go and look up some of this stuff, but I talk about this rubber band analogy, which is your best scenario of understanding it. And if we go, if people are just listening, imagine you're holding a rubber band in your hand. It is kind of going back to your physics classes, and if you didn't like physics, sorry, but we talk about potential energy. And if we think of metabolic adaptation as moving away from where our body typically likes to sit. So some people aren't comfortable with a set point or settling point, but roughly where your body sits, when you're not trying to apply pressure to the system, whether that's body weight up or body weight down. And if we diet, we stretch that rubber band, and basically the potential energy, the energy for that rubber band to flick away becomes higher. I did actually, when I was in Sydney in 2019, I was talking about this a bit. And I was saying rubber band, and I honestly, 250 people, just blank faces. And I was like, I'd had a big thing about pick and mix. None of them knew what pick and mix were. And they were like, and I said, do you know what pick and mix are? And I said, do you know sweets? And they're like, oh, lollies. And I was like, no, a lolly is not, and then I licked a lolly. And then there was a whole ththing about innuendos, like, oh no, mate, that's a gobby. And I was like, oh, don't go there. And then they said, I said, do you know what a rubber band is? And then this girl in the front row goes, do you mean like a glute band? And I was like, oh my God. I said, fine, we'll talk about glute bands. But anyway, so I said, so you've got a glute band and you stretch it. And so if we think about a glute band, you stretch it and you ping it. The faster you stretch it, if we then stop and hold, and you think about the tension between your hands, and then you pull it slowly to that same place, what's the tension? It's exactly the same whether you pull it. And that is the best analogy for understanding how this metabolic reduction happens. If you lose weight, the amount of weight you lose is going to impact on your metabolic rate regardless. The distance you move from that settling point is going to impact your metabolic rate and the metabolic adaptation that you mentioned. So things impacting like your NEAT. And realistically, you look at the research, and I talk about all the research, and if you consider this pragmatically, on the ground, real life, you've got a study where we've got people dieting for 6 months, 26 weeks-ish, 24 to 26 weeks, and they are dieting on a moderate calorie deficit. And then the alternative group is doing a much more aggressive approach, but they only diet for 8 to 11 weeks. And this is one particular study. It might be Nackers et al. 2010, but I can't remember. And you look at these graphs and you get this massive weight loss and then this maintenance of weight loss while the other group is still dieting. Now, one of the key points in that study is, well, the metabolic adaptation was no greater in the fast weight loss group. But secondly, we then get this point of people who criticize fast rates of weight loss. And there's a couple of other studies that are often quoted where it's like, well, when they dieted slower, that they were able to maintain their training a bit better. But the difference in the studies is, well, this group lost twice as much weight. So they could go back to maintenance or their small surplus twice as quickly. But they don't carry forward. And you have to understand and interpret the research. It's not the researcher's fault. It's the people interpreting it, because the research can't do that. They can't add in another part to the study. But, oh, that group that finished, We then got them to keep doing the training, go back to maintenance. We kept following them. Oh, look, they were stronger than the other group at 8 weeks. So um, this whole idea that it's going to damage your metabolism, it's just not true. It just doesn't happen. And so if we equate for total weight loss, you're probably ending up better doing the fast approach.
That reminds me just the Matador study, which was like basically one group dieting 2 weeks on and then maintenance for 2 weeks and 2 weeks on and maintenance for 2 weeks. And they ended up with like, let's just say like 16 weeks spent in a deficit over 32 total weeks. And the other group was 16 weeks in a straight deficit. And they were like, the group that did diet breaking lost less lean body mass, maintained their metabolism a little bit better, but they didn't measure it. They didn't equate for time. And so if they had taken the group that did continuous dieting and let them go to maintenance for 16 weeks and test both groups at the end of 32 weeks, I'm betting on either there being no benefit or I'm betting on the other group. And the quote that you'll hear is, if you drop somebody's calories too low, they'll adapt and have nowhere to go. And like, I always like the biggest adaptation your body makes is losing weight. Like, people are like, oh, you're going to adapt. I'm like, yeah, because you're going to be a lot smaller, a lot quicker. Like that is the biggest adaptation. I know it's not necessarily, when we talk about metabolic adaptation, we're talking about like independent of the weight you lose, but the biggest adaptation in the true sense of the word adaptation that your body is making in response to the deficit size is becoming smaller. So you're right. Like that person will adapt quicker by losing weight quicker. And the rubber band analogy is something I've, credited to you on this podcast multiple times as a great analogy for just that potential energy. So from a metabolic adaptation perspective, we're looking at just it's proportionate. There's no exponential shift based on speed. It's proportionate. If you lose weight more quickly, we see a proportionate response, and in all of the pros and the cons. It's not like there's an exponential hack here. We see metabolic adaptation happen within 24 hours of people fasting for 24 hours. This stuff happens super quickly, and it's not like if it's going to happen in proportion to the size and the length of the deficit. There's no way that we're going to be able to find a perfect, like a perfect size duration relationship to optimize a result. And so I just don't think that's, I think you answered that incredibly well. And then I think that also you could use the same exact analogy for muscle loss, where people are like, okay, like I diet super aggressively, like, and you even mentioned it just now. It's like I diet super aggressively, I'm at more risk for muscle loss. It's like you are, but like if we equate for time, and you could spend some time on the back end of that deficit, going back to maintenance more quickly, even maybe into a small surplus more quickly, like we are probably talking about a either net very similar outcome or potentially a net greater outcome in terms of net, losing less lean body mass over a certain period of time.
And I will just say on that, one of the point, I guess, initially in my thinking for the calculator was allowing people to, so where another area this came from, really me creating the calculator, was I wrote an article in Alan Aragon's research review many years ago, and I essentially discussed the optimal method for dieting to single digit body fat. And I produced this kind of essentially what was a decaying rate of weight loss, and which is quite funny because lots of what I base I'm basing kind of the aggressive dieting stuff I do was on this Alpert 2005 paper, where I fell asleep reading the paper twice. That's in one paper. It's such a tough read. I'm good at maths, but this is just next level. But it's really what has been programmed into the behind the scenes of the calculator. But the idea behind this this article was, at what rate do you need to lose at different stages of dieting to single digit body fats to stave off lean body mass loss? And the key thing that I guess even was surprising for me was, even if you do this, okay, 2 pounds a week or 1 pound a week or half a pound a week, this calculator essentially showed if you're getting to stage lean, and the actual deficit that you can create to where the deficit can be provided for by adipose tissue, once you're at that level of body fat, we're talking a few hundred calories. We're talking 200, 300, 350 calories. So you get to a point where you go, oh, well, this is very interesting. if we take it into the real day, who's getting the best results in the natural bodybuilding scene? It's the likes of the 3D MJ gurus. And what are they doing? They're dieting people for long periods. And I still remember Alberto Nunez posting a picture of him 12 weeks out, and every comment, even from knowledgeable guys, was, Alberto, it looks like you're already there. This is kind of surprising. Why do you think this is what 12 weeks looks like? And he goes, you don't understand lean if you think this is stage ready. And it wasn't just that. It's the idea that he maybe did only have 4 pounds to lose. But people go, well, you can lose 4 pounds in 4 to 8 weeks. And he's like, no, 4 pounds when you're that lean. And he didn't talk about this, but this is what I relate it to, is like, you want to lose half a pound, 1 pound, 2 pounds. When you're that lean and have that little body fat, the actual rate that we can get those fatty acids out of that tissue is so slow. So when we talk about lean body mass loss, my calculator will tell you, if you eat here, you're going to stop that happening. But if you choose to dip below that, this is why we then need the refeeds to protect some of that lean body mass. Because we can protect it by providing, obviously, carbohydrate, muscle glycogen, these sorts of things. We're not immediately breaking down those sort of muscle fibers. So yes, lean body mass loss, it's a boogeyman as well. I will also say that people are like, oh, I've lost muscle. And really, they just lost fat. They weren't as muscular as they thought they were. Or they may be not feeling as strong, but we understand that there's neurological impacts of that. And you can regain muscle. So even if you got it a little bit wrong, you can regain muscle so quickly, and then you get back to that horrible ceiling that we never get past. And you're back where you were, but you lost fat twice as fast.
Yeah, and something you touched on there, maybe we can say a little bit more explicitly, is this idea that like at higher levels of body fat, you can sustain a larger deficit without the risk of muscle loss. But the leaner you get, the smaller the deficit should be if you are trying to maximize the retention of lean body mass.
Exactly.
Kind of plays into this question that I will ultimately ask about who can do this more reasonably and less reasonably, or who can go more aggressive, less aggressive, or should, and those are some more nuanced questions. Let talk a little bit about we can quote research, we can talk more generally about just what we see when we compare. Maybe it was a study you were just talking about before, which is like low calorie dieting versus very low calorie diet in terms of like reported levels of hunger.
Yeah. So, this is the thing, and I bring up lots and lots of data and graphs to try and not try and explain this, to show exactly what happens. And it is so funny, because as much as I guess people who pay to come and hear me speak, more often than not, have a level of respect. Like, I respect this person, I'm going to pay this money because I think I'm going to get good information. They still turn up and go, I still don't get it. I still don't believe it. I need to know. I need to understand more. And then they understand it by the end of the presentation, but they still go away. And I don't know, sorry if I said this at the beginning of the talk, but someone just saying, I could not believe it. Yeah, I did say it. He said, I didn't not trust you. But when he came back to me, a client himself, and said, I'm not hungry anymore. I'm just wowed, and just nonstop. Lots of the coaches coming saying, look, I've tried it on myself because I just wanted to really get a grips of what I'm asking people to do. And I said, it's a fantastic idea. And, some people, one girl in Sydney said, this isn't going to work for me. I love food. I relate to my clients because I'm always eating. I have competed, but this is what I look like. I'm not some super lean fitness professional. I'm a normal human being who wants to stay healthy and wants to eat well. This is never going to work for me. And 3 weeks later, I've created an aggressive diet coaching group just to, I guess, help people that came to the seminars. And it might be something that I extend on when everything goes public and online, and I'm probably going to create. I've decided that I don't really want people just going to the calculator and just plugging numbers in and doing it, because I talk the second and third of the seminar, there's lots around the coaching process, understanding how to troubleshoot, essentially compassionate approaches, a big discussion around positive weight regain. So there's a lot to be understood there with regards to adherence and long-term weight maintenance of the weight loss. And but yeah, she just turned around and was like, I can't believe it. I don't understand how it does this. And I said, well, weren't you listening to all the presentation slides? So the best, one of the best papers that I like because of the visuals it gives you is Coutinho et al. 2018, because what it does is it compares pre-dieting phase, weight loss phase, and weight maintenance phase hunger. And it measures the hunger in quite a nice, nuanced way. And it gives you details on, pre-meal hunger, hunger immediately, postprandial hunger. And it gives you such a good visual for what people then do just realize in real life. You give someone a 500-calorie meal in real life and in the study, and you give someone this maybe 200-calorie meal. And hunger post-meal, desire to eat post-meal in the 200-calorie meal goes pretty much to zero. Oh, I'm satisfied. That's all good. The other one does come down as you'd expect, but it doesn't go as low as the other one. Then likewise, the regain of hunger in that postprandial and post-absorptive period, so that, we talk about satiety of a meal, but then the satiation and our want for our next meal, you see increases at a much more rapid rate at moderate calorie deficits. Whereas when you hit like this 3 to 5 day utopia and onwards on an aggressive diet, and it shows it in the studies, and everyone reports this in real life, if they follow a few, I guess, some of the caveats that I have for this, you don't think about that next meal. You can very much just, for me, one of the reasons I also like aggressive dieting is because it gives you loads more time in your day. One of the sections of the presentation, I'll talk about its impact on sleep. And it really is quite astounding what it does to your sleep. I end up functioning off about 4 hours sleep a night. And it just means I literally gain another 2 to 4 hours a day if I'm just really, really busy. And so it's quite a nice little effect. So I get leaner, that's all good, but mental clarity and sleeping less and not thinking about food or preparing food as much. But yeah, so with regards to this hunger, we see, a difference in pre-meal hunger, postprandial hunger immediately after eating. And what we see within the research as well is adherence shoots up. And there's two obvious reasons for that. One of them is obviously you're less hungry. But the other reason, which everyone always gets, I sort of say, why do you think that is? And everyone shouts it out. Well, it's the results. And I'm like, yeah. I posted yesterday this person saying, I lost 10 pounds or 9 pounds in 9 or 10 days. I can't remember. It was one or the other way. And I was like, geez, that's unbelievable. Not really unbelievable, but it is just fantastic for her, considering this is someone who's like, oh, I've been struggling to lose weight. And as well, I'm like, well, how's your energy? How's your hunger? And she's like, I feel amazing. And she said to me, was it her or someone else said, I'm not sure I've hit the utopia, but energy levels are good and I'm not really hungry. And I said, what do you mean? That sounds like utopia to me. You've just lost 5 pounds in 4 days. And then someone said to me, someone from, I think it was a Singapore talk, said, I lost that in 6 days. And I was like, geez, I always talk about the first time I aggressive dieted, I lost 1 pound a day for the first 11 days. And it's just a different mindset of dieting. You go, oh my God, like I've never seen anything like this in any of my dieting history. And clients do just get this thing of, this is something special, because it's also, if they can get past that 3 to 5 days. So I do have a protocol. I feel like reverse dieting has become a big, I mean, it has been for a while, but a big buzzword within the industry. And people are almost like, sign up to my program. In the first 8 weeks of that program, you're reverse dieting. And the research doesn't support that. I really want to say that clearly, publicly. You're buying an ebook, you're doing a whatever, doing a program. The research doesn't support this idea that you need to. I saw one, it's a bit of an old ebook, and I won't say the woman who wrote it, but she she's typically known as an evidence-based community person. And it's like, you need to reverse diet for as many weeks as you've been dieting before. And I was like, based on what? Based on nothing. You've pulled out of your ass, and it's unethical. So yeah, I have like basically a 3 to 7 day protocol to start the diet well, based on actual evidence and actual physiology. And so, it gives you this, starting from the best point, but then also you get this amazing um start to the process. And what we know from the wider body of research is people's um one of the correlates or factors that we know is most strongly related to weight loss, total weight loss, and weight loss maintenance is initial magnitude of weight loss. And it's like, we're talking about, oh, we're going to do little habits. We're going to just take one fish oil a day. We're going to just eat a cup of vegetables. We're going to eat a fist of fats. And that's all you're going to do this week. And this week, you're going to focus on eating to 80% full. And this week, no, the evidence actually says that's the worst thing you can do. The evidence actually shows if you just throw the kitchen sink, you do everything, you make big changes, that's what helps people. And I actually wrote down sustainability and photo shoot because of one of your earlier comments, because I think it's a really good thing to mention again now. But just I actually discourage against photo shoots, bodybuilding competitions, anything with a deadline, because it stops people being flexible with their life. If something happens and you have a deadline, you will not give yourself compassion. You will go, I'm behind. I'm going to dig in more on willpower. I'm going to deny myself this food. And the absolute worst thing you can do in any dieting protocol, but I'm trying to get people away from in my aggressive protocol, is food restriction, restrictive mindset. Yes, you're having to put restrictions on yourself, but your mentality has to be, not I'm going to dig deeper within myself. It needs to be, I'm coming at this from and that's why it's good, because most of the time on an aggressive diet, you're not trying. You're literally going, oh my God, this is so easy. That's why it's super cool. That's why actually I talk about some of the clinical research around binge eating and what, one of the other, you may have written this down. I know you're going to mention physiological and psychological aspects, but people say, is it going to give people eating disorders? And actually in the research, the opposite is true. It categorically, aggressive dieting or level of calorie deficit is not correlated to onset of eating disorders. And I remember presenting that at a conference, and one of the other presenters was a literal world leader in eating disorders, nice guidelines sort of contributor. And I looked down at her when I said that, and she was like, and I was like, phew. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I knew it was right, but I was worried. um, so yeah, on this topic of hunger, it's wide ranging in terms of its impact. It's not causing eating disorders, and it's allowing people to be adherent for the right reasons, because they don't want to, these cravings are being reduced, that they don't have to dig into willpower and actually end up with something I talk about is disinhibition. We really want to get away from being disinhibited around food. As soon as they're presented with Krispy Kreme donuts or whatever, I need to eat them all, because you can undermine all of your progress on a diet if you haven't got control of that side of the equation.
Yeah, I think that we want it. We want it. Everybody, every coach, educator trying to actually in this field, trying to help people get healthier, is trying to find the balance of what level of change should I put on this person? What's going to make them ultimately the most successful? That's the question we're asking. And it's on an individual basis. But I think what you're saying is that, one, I think 100% true that there's something here of there's a tighter correlation between what is sustainable between people who actually see a lot of initial progress versus people who are making very small changes and don't lose a lot of weight in the beginning. Like that it's actually ironic, paradoxical, of it's more sustainable that you did the extreme thing because you tied, this is actually working, and there's a bit of buy-in and there's a bit more motivation. And so I think that that's a bit paradoxical. I think people don't think about that. I think people, like you said, most people default to a tiptoe, very small changes, very small this, because they think that that's easier, but they're forgetting the fact that actually humans can rationalize discomfort for reward. We can. And it's about finding that relationship of juice worth the squeeze. And it's, yes, there's not a lot of juice that you have to, you don't have to do much work to be like, I'm going to have a fist of fats and I'm going to have one more broccoli floret with each meal. And fine, but the return on that investment is very low also. And people are forgetting that as well. And so I don't think you would say every single person in every single circumstance as aggressively as possible. But I think we need to get rid of this idea of like, yeah, we're taking very small steps with very small changes, just spending 6 months out of a deficit, just building these tiny habits, because I think that is an appeal to, hey, let's do stuff that people can do. But I think we are forgetting that there's somewhat of just trying to lose weight, just trying, being in the headspace of giving effort is finite. And I think if you burn that somebody's match in the first 3 months and they've gotten nothing out of it, your heart's in the right place because you wanted them to eat more fruits and vegetables and go for more walks, and you should do all that stuff. But if somebody can't sink their teeth into the return on their investment in the first 12 weeks, that in and of itself, that is unsustainable. It's unsustainable for people to keep putting forth effort without getting that return. So I think that like you said, is certainly not straightforward. And in fact, if you were good to look at the research, it's more likely the case that people who make big changes and get big returns end up buying in more and seeing actual more sustainable results.
Yeah, I think with that soundbite, you've really hit a huge nail on the head with regards to any level of dieting leads to a taxation of your mental time resources, all resources, and you have to get results with that. On the subjects of sustainability as well, I want to sort of make the point that the biggest, perhaps, nutritional conundrum that we have is weight loss maintenance beyond anything else. Anyone who's still debating low carb versus low fat is a muppet. It's a complete waste of everyone's time. I think it's still a good point of discussion to discuss these rates of weight loss, but it's nowhere near the issue that we have globally of how can we help people maintain the weight. And the thing I want to say is the research, as far as I'm concerned, is very, very heavily weighted in the favor of faster, more aggressive protocols. And you can just read this in numerous sort of meta-analyses, systematic reviews of this, where it's essentially comparing for fast versus moderate. And those who have a greater initial weight loss are those who maintain a clinically meaningful, a statistically significant and clinically significant amount of weight loss, whether that's 5 or 10%. Than their counterparts who lost at a moderate rate at every year of follow-up. So if the study follows up 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, those who chose the faster approach have the better outcomes. Now, it might be that 7 years, only 30% of subjects were still maintaining 10%, which is still fantastic out of, hundreds, if not thousands of data points that we've got. But the biggest discussion still on the table is, how can we get that to 100% of people maintaining? And that's a totally different discussion. But if you are in the business of helping people change their body fat and their body composition, you have to ask yourself. I've been doing this question. I did it I was in Arizona, and I sort of said, okay, I'm going to ask you a question today at the beginning of my talk, and most of these people didn't know me. It was like 200 trainers, and I said, if you had to pick today, if you would use an aggressive approach or a moderate approach, and that's all you could ever do with every client ever again, you have to pick one. Which would you choose? So going back to your point of like, I would never say this was the case of like, you have to pick one. But if you had to, which one would you pick? And I said, and it's not like a scenario of going, right, if you had to pick one, missionary or doggy style, which would you pick? And we go, oh, it depends on my mood. It depends on my mood. No, you have to pick one. And in that question, I did say there is one right answer, and it was missionary. But anyway, the answer to this question is, if we're basing it on the research, unequivocally, I think we need to be picking the aggressive, the rapid fat loss, the aggressive deficits, because that is what's showing us the better results overall. And it's difficult for people to think of that, because most of us are inherently against aggressive approaches, because all we attribute that to is scam artists, quick fix artists, and this stuff. We don't attribute it to good coaching, behavior change protocols, multi-phasic approaches to dieting. So you discussed the Matador study. It's a very crude multi-phasic. It's very fixed, 2 on, 2 off, whatever. Whereas if we can go, okay, we're going to do rapid fat loss for X number of weeks, and then we can choose based on a life circumstance what we're going to do, whether that's someone's menstrual cycle or their feelings, or whether the calculator says they're going to start losing lean body mass if they continue for longer. We can go back to a more moderate approach. And the nice thing about this scenario is, well, if you go back to a moderate approach, one, it gives you more dietary flexibility, food flexibility, greater opportunity for micronutrient intake, etc., dietary variety. But also, there's a lag on our hunger ever coming back, because in that study, the Coutinho et al. Study, what shows is when we go back to the weight maintenance phase, hunger does start to come back. But actually, within the aggressive dieting group, only, I'd encourage people to go and read it or just come to my seminar and I'll explain it all to you. But we do have this issue of once people stop dieting, that's when things do need to become sustainable. Don't coach people for fat loss for their whole life. It sucks. No one wants a calorie count for the rest of their life. That's rubbish. They need to go, and this is what I talk about within the seminar is, okay, we make it multiphasic, and then we can have these opportunities for coaching to live. If someone pays you to work with you for 4 months, let's say, do you want to spend that whole 4 months coaching them to lose weight? Or, and the answer to this is completely rhetorical, a way better thing to do is get them all of the results in 6 weeks and then coach them to live and maintain that, because that's the thing that people truly struggle with. Can we do that through calorie counting? And then good. And then let's pull away the calorie counting. And then we need to find habits that have the same magnitude of effect. You can't give someone the habit of taking a